Hey everybody, welcome back. So today we're going to be focusing on our last introductory art element, and that's shape. So in art, shape is a two-dimensional area that stands out due to something that's defined it with a boundary, okay? So it's separated from the background. Shape is our foundation for making three-dimensional things on a 2D paper, okay? We're going to be using our tools so far of line, we're going to be using value, and creating shapes out of them. And that's really our building block to start making things look like there's actually light hitting it, making things look three-dimensional, and we're going to use it for people, creatures, places, all sorts of things, all right? So let's get some practice in. Okay, so let's get going here. So we're just going to do some quick sketches and kind of go for it, all right? Don't be afraid to turn your paper as you need to. I'm going to start with a cube, and we're not drawing in perspective right now, okay? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay. So I'm going to be drawing like isometric shapes, and that just means shapes without perspective. So I'm just roughing out a cube here. I should have done this part first, the square part first, okay? And then I'm going to pick an angle that, and keep it kind of the same angle going as best as I can at least, going all the way around this cube. And the lines aren't converging or anything like that. That means getting smaller as they get further away from me, because that would be in perspective. This is just an isometric shape. All right, simple cube, simple building block to work with. And let's go ahead and give it some shading, okay? So we're talking about shape here, like this, and we're also gonna be talking about value, okay? So we got shape and value. Okay, so value is how dark or light a color is, okay? Or whatever you see. So I've got a pretty dark line, giving my kind of outline to my cube here. And I'm gonna use value to kind of communicate some things about it. So this is gonna be our universal symbol for a light source here. And what this is kind of like just a universal kind of like little light. Could be a sun, could be a whatever, lamp. And this is the direction in which it is hitting my cube. So now as an artist, I still have to make some decisions here, whether the light is hitting the top or the front more. Let's go ahead and say the top. Let's say this light is coming from far away on top, which means this side is going to be our kind of a shadow side. So I'm going to go ahead and make that darker by just using some hatch lines, all right? Again, we're just sketching here. Then I need to make a decision as to what's darker, the front or the top. And since I said this is coming more on the top, this is gonna be my highlight area. And I can leave that white if I want to, right on, even though it's a white piece of paper. And I'm just gonna add a little bit of value here because I think it's gonna get maybe a little bit of light, okay? And if you got a pencil, you can smudge it in a little bit if you want. Doesn't really matter too much, it's just a sketch. But this already gives us some information, right? Where the light's hitting, where the shadow side's hitting, and now I'm doing some cross-hatching kind of there to make it a little darker. And what I'm doing here is I'm just giving a little bit of a fade from this corner to the bottom, okay? And the reason why is because we've got our, so we've got our shadow side, and then we've got our highlight, but we've also got something called reflected light, okay? And reflected light is light that comes from our light source, but goes past our object and bounces off whatever's back here. If it's sitting on a table or a surface, it's gonna bounce off that surface and illuminate a little bit on the bottom here, okay? Not a whole lot, just a little bit. I mean, I guess it depends on how reflective the surface is. So if you have a highly reflective surface, it will give it a lot of illumination. If it's, more absorbent of light, then it will just, maybe just a little bit. But what this will do is make it a little darker up top and a little lighter on the bottom, okay? And last thing I'm gonna do for this cube is what I call faking my shadow, okay? So what I mean by that is, now there's a way to do it a lot more precisely in perspective and everything, but we're just sketching, and for what the kind of art I do, you know, with faking, it's usually good enough. Okay, so here's how I'm going to fake it. I'm going to imagine the light source coming over here, coming in this direction. Now it's far away, so it's not coming from this point here, because that would be pretty close and it would make a very spread out. I'm imagining it like way far away, coming and hitting this, you know, corner here, and kind of going like down there. And if it's going to hit this corner, that corner is going to be some, maybe I can make it over here. And I can make it shorter if I, but I drew the angle kind of like that, so I'm keeping it the same. So that means my shadow is going to go from this corner down here to wherever I think this is going to go, okay? Then I've got a corner here, so imagine my light source coming from that direction and hitting somewhere over there. And then I also imagine it coming over here and hitting somewhere over here. And then that would connect to that, obviously. Use the same kind of angle here. And I kind of just faked my shadow. Is it perfect? No. Does it look enough like I know what I'm doing? Maybe. I'm sure some people that are very skilled at this will be able to see this and be like, that's all wrong. But I think your average person, it's going to look good enough. All right, I'm just doing cross-hatching lines, right, to kind of build this up. And this is just however dark you want it to go. You know, the stronger your light source, if it was like the sun and it's like noon or something like that, you're going to get a very strong light source, giving us a very strong shadow, right? If it's in a house, there's multiple light sources, it might be a lot softer. And I'm making it a little darker towards the cube. And then kind of bringing it out. Use the side of my pencil here. And I just sketched my cube. All right, let's move on. Next shape. Let's do a sphere. Okay, so the way now you could get something and trace it. You could get a compass. But I want us to get used to sketching spheres. So the way I do that is I kind of make very light circles and kind of build it up. And each one that I'm making, I'm kind of trying to correct it a little bit. And kind of shave off areas and add areas a little bit thicker that, you know, maybe it looked too squashed or something. And, you know, it's not perfect and it doesn't need to be. It's just a sketch. And a lot of times when we're drawing things like, you know, like faces and bodies and stuff, we just need to be able to sketch. We need to be able to sketch a sphere, not really draw a perfect sphere. All right, so there's my sphere. And let's go ahead and use the same light source. Now I could draw it again. I will for this, but I get as long as you have the idea where the light source is coming from. Okay, so my highlight is going to be where the light source hits it. So it's going to hit it kind of right here. And my shadow side is going to be back here. And because the surface is curved, we're going to get this core shadow. Okay, now this is going to be different than the cube, okay? So our cube has flat surfaces, which generally stay the same value. So if this is light, it's going to pretty much be all light. Maybe it'll go from a very slightly darker light to light, like that if I wanted to add a little bit of something there. This will be, maybe this is kind of like a light medium right here value, and this is a dark value in the back. Now I did bring it up a little bit to like a medium tone because of my reflected light, but I wouldn't want to be like dark to light, right? A dark value to light value on the same surface for a flat surface, because that's just not how light reacts to it. If you had a spotlight or something very concentrated on a part of it, you could see a dark to light transition. But if the light source is far enough away, you're going to see a gradual change. And if it's something like the sun or something, you know, far enough away from our object, you're not going to see much change, okay? Very little change. Now, that differs when we're trying to communicate a sphere. Because it's round, we've got this transition from my core shadow. And it's rounded here because it's the shape of the sphere. Again, I'm trying to communicate something round. So I'm going to rough in my core shadow. And now to communicate round, I want to blend out to my highlight, right? Which is where the light's hitting the sphere directly. right? So I'm just kind of using, again, I'm using hatch lines and kind of cross-hatching, but this is just a sketch. I'm not trying to make a perfect sphere, and we don't need to for this lesson. We just want to be able to kind of get our values sketched in, you know what I mean? So I'm kind of trying to transition and get lighter and lighter till I get to white here. And notice I did my core shadow not all the way to the end, because just like the cube, I've got reflected light going on the back side of this sphere as well. So you don't want to see a stripe. You want to see a slow transition, called a gradient a lot of times, a gradient to my highlight. I can blend it in my finger a little bit if that helps. And there we go. I've got my sphere. So once again, I'm gonna fake my shadow. The light's coming more on this side, so there'll be very little, if any, kind of light caught on the end of the sphere here. And I have it kind of coming away over here. So I'm gonna imagine my sphere is gonna be something like this. So the shadow's gonna be opposite my light source. And I'm gonna try and also do the same transition where I make it a little darker right underneath and give it a slight kind of gradient out to the edge of my shadow. All right, so I've got a cube, I've got a sphere, and let's do our next shape. Okay, next shape we're going to use, one of our building blocks for a lot of stuff is, that's a very general term, stuff. Well, for heads in general right now, and it's going to be a cylinder. So I started with the ellipse for no apparent reason, really. And I'm making the sides of my cylinder. And all an ellipse is when you're looking at a circle at an angle, right? And you get this kind of oval shape where it's, you know, skinnier on one side and you know, like, so here I've got the sides wider and the top and bottom skinnier. But it's because I'm trying to insinuate or trying to communicate more so that I am looking at this circle from an angle. So the higher you are above it, right, the more your ellipse will look like a circle, right, the wider it will be, right? So now I'm a little more on top until, you know, it could be almost right on top of my cylinder, and if these were cylinders here, right? And I can kind of communicate that I'm looking really down on this cylinder. But this one I'm kind of trying, like, it's more straight on kind of a view. So on the bottom here, I'm going to turn my page all the way around. I'm going to copy the same line I did here for the bottom of that ellipse and draw it right there. Okay, now the cylinder is a little bit like the cube and a little bit like the sphere. So the top and the bottom, which we can't see, is going to be like the cube, right? Where we have a flat surface that the light hits it in pretty much, and we get one value out of it. But the side is going to be a little more like the sphere. So let's go ahead and do the side first here. So we're going to have a core shadow because we have no hard edge to, you know, for the light to hit and sharply change to another value. We've got a core shadow. Right? Again, I'm doing the same kind of light source. And then we're going to go to our highlight, which is going to be right here. The light's going to kind of hit a little more directly. And I'm going to do it like I did the sphere. And transition to the highlight as kind of smoothly as possible. And sometimes it's easier to do this when your pencil is like less sharp, right? And then you can kind of get a nice flat surface on the tip of your pencil and get a nice kind of smooth transition. Oh, hit a little line there. Let's get rid of that. Okay, then I'm gonna just see if I can get the rest by blending it with my finger here. And I did add a little bit of value to the opposite side. Okay, the reason I did, this may be overly complicated, is because as the surface curves away from us, we are seeing more surface in a shorter space, right? So like, you know, here I'm looking at a little more straight on, so I'm looking at this much space, but as this curves around, I'm looking at the same amount of space condensed. And when you condense all that value, usually it looks a little darker. It starts looking darker because you're seeing more of it, in, again, in a smaller amount of space. Okay, so here we've also got a reflected light. So now this top part of the cylinder is far away from my surface, my table surface, whatever down here. So I'm going to try and make it a little brighter as it gets towards the bottom. The reflected light brighter, that is. You can always erase if you go too, you know, far, or you can just do it again. This is, again, quick sketches. These are not masterpieces. We're just doing some quick sketches. Okay, and then the top, I'm going to say it's kind of like the cube there, where I have pretty much a direct hit from my light there. And I'm just going to have I'm just going to give it a touch of value and kind of blend it out there. It's too much even. I don't even want to give it that much. But I like to do, even if it's like my brightest spot, I like to give it a little something, just like a little transition from light or complete white to just a little bit, you know, slight amount of value, darker value to it. Okay, there's my cylinder. Let's fake my shadow. I didn't leave a whole lot of room here, so I'm going to try and draw a little shorter shadow. And I'm just going to ignore these sketches right there. So once again, I'm doing a light from my light source, a line from my light source, where the edge of my shadow would be. And on both sides, imagine it hitting like that. And then imagine the top being rounded, like that, wherever, you know, like that kind of thing. And again, this is faking it. It's not perfect, but I think it's, you know, if you use your imagination enough to think about what kind of curve it would be, what you would see on that end, and how it would catch the light and the shadow and all that, I think you can get something convincing enough for a sketch. And if you're not sure, you know, you can always just look online and see what you can find. You'd be surprised at what you can find out there when you just type in something as specific as, you know, cylinder shadow or something and see what comes up. Things come up. Okay. All right. Now our last shape we're going to draw, I'm going to move over to the section where I have a little more space for a shadow. I'm going to draw a cone. So I'm starting with these kind of triangular shaped lines here. Then I'm going to go ahead and round the bottom, very much like the bottom of an ellipse, because that's what it is. If I could see through it, there would be an ellipse there. Okay, and again, it looks like a flat, you know, nothing 3D about it until I add a little bit of value to it. So very much like my cylinder here, where I'm going to have a core shadow. And I'm going to blend out to my highlight. And I tried to give it a little bit of value on the side here. I gave it too much for the same reason I did on the cylinder, because we're seeing the condensed surface space, you know, or the surface area condensed into little small space there. And then I'm going to go out to my reflected light there, which is going to get a little bit lighter to like a medium tone once again. And once again, a little lighter on the bottom. Blend that a little bit with my finger. Okay, and last thing is my shadow. And I'm imagining the light come here, and I'm just imagining like, okay, if the angle of the light's coming here, it's gonna hit my top of my cone, somewhere along this area, and hit it. Then I just have to kind of imagine how it would connect to the ends there. That's really it. I'll go ahead and darken that. Okay, and there is my shadow. All right, we've got some basic shape drawings. All right, and we're gonna just use these things and think about our drawings and our faces in particular as we move on to that next, and think about how to use these shapes to build our faces and how to add value and where the shadows would be, where the highlights would be, and all that sort of thing. All right, hope you guys learned a little bit about shape today, and I'll see you on the next video.